Facebook.
Hello, everyone. This is Mayor Deirdre Waterman here for a webinar, which we've invited you to. The title and subject of this webinar is the status of the plan to restore healthcare benefits and discussion of the mayor's proposal for City Council to enact higher pension payment levels for all eligible retirees. I'm here with a panel of experts and people who have long been part of the process that has brought us to this point. And I'm going to introduce them now. They will all be presenters for you and also be here for question and answer sessions later on in this program. I thank you for coming, and we hope this will be both instructive and informative for all of you who've come to hear about these plans, which have long been awaited and now on the verge of being realized. First, I will introduce is Attorney John Clark from the law firm of G. Marco, Mullins, and Horton. Okay, and we can highlight each speaker, Ken, as I announce them. All right. Mr. Clark was the lead attorney in the mediation, first starting with the litigation when the emergency manager suspended retiree health care. There was a group of retirees called Cypria that filed a lawsuit against the emergency manager. When I became mayor, I inherited that lawsuit, and I was able to have the court allow us to go into mediation by picking a court-ordered mediator. And I chose a panel of people to be part of our mediation team. Attorney John Clark led that mediation team. And we were in mediation for some 2.5 or more years to get us to this point. The next person I'd like to introduce is Attorney Anthony Chubb. Attorney Chubb is also part of the same law firm, and he is the city's lead city attorney for our council and other matters in the city. And he has been very instrumental in a help to conduct the affairs of the city of Pontiac for the legal department. He will also handle the question and answer session of this webinar when we get to that point. Also, I'd like to introduce you to Darren Carrington. He is the finance director of the city of Pontiac, and he has been here, not during the mediation, but coming after to make sure that the city's portion and responsibility for finances of this plan are fully realized. And he has also been the one who has fielded a lot of the questions that have come out since we sent the letter to retirees informing them of their option to elect either healthcare or the $20,000 payout. So he will be here. He's fielded a lot of your questions and will be here to answer more of those questions that have been presented as his staff has answered those phone calls. The next person here is Samantha Kopass. She is an attorney from the law firm of Miller Canfield. And she was the one that the city engaged after the settlement agreement had been approved by the city council and by Cypria and by the court, that we next had to file the application with the Internal Revenue Service. And Samantha Kopass was the expert we hired who went through all of the many myriad steps it took to prepare that application and to follow through with the filing with the IRS and their subsequent requirements and answers to make sure that we had completed that whole process. She'll be one of the presenters to talk to you about that process and where we stand with that now. Next, I would like to introduce Kirill Zhen from the firm of Volt. And I'd like to also mention one of his partners in that firm, Tony Saunders, who will be with us shortly. Tony Saunders was part of the mediation team. He was the financial guru as we went through many different kinds of permutations and configurations about how to bring back retiree health care. It was Tony Saunders who ran all the financial figures and helped us with the various constructs to be able to come up with the right solution that was agreeable both to Cypria, the city of Pontiac, and the court. Kirill Jen is the one who has continued that financial modeling for us as we come up with other configurations, particularly the one related to the proposal we're going to talk about this evening. And that's the proposal we have to ask the City Council to amend the ordinance in such a way that the temporary increase in monthly pension benefit that retirees have been receiving, which will end at the restoration of the retirement benefits, that we want to have a way to bring permanent increased benefits. And that is Kirill Jen, who's run all those numbers and who has done the preliminary modeling that the council will have to repeat if council is going to go ahead and follow my recommendations to do this proposal for permanent pension increase amounts. So that's the topic we're going to talk about first during this presentation. And then once the presenters have done their presentations in that regard, we will have questions and answers for that particular proposal. Now, following that, we know that there are other questions about other parts of the settlement agreement, including the opt-out that people have received letters about and are now determining if they want to take the election to opt out from receiving health care or not. But we're going to save those questions and answers for the last third of the program as we deal with the proposal for the increased pension benefits first. So I know this has been a lot of information for our retirees to take in, but so that's why we're putting out these public service webinars so that you have a chance to face-to-face ask your questions, get the explanations, and so you can see that to your satisfaction and know how to opt out and what the potential is for higher benefits. This has been a long time coming, and it's been a personal agenda for me to return to our retirees their rightfully deserved and promised health care. I know many of you have been waiting and realizing that it takes quite a long time to work this out, both for the benefit of the retirees and for the city. Because when I came on board, there was a specter for the city that if this lawsuit had been decided adversely without any alternative way of handling it, it could be that the city would be hit with tens of millions of dollars in damages that could have put the city back in bankruptcy. So it is so good that this is a win-win solution for all of us, that we're able not only to come up with a solution to return this, to keep the city financially solvent, in fact, thriving now. We've come a long way in the last 7 years in terms of our financial stability, and we wanted to maintain that, but we also wanted to make sure that the retirees got their due settlement with the retiree health care. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker to come to the panel discussion, and that is John Clark.
Madam Mayor, thank you very much for that warm introduction. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, the other panelists today, as well as the attendees. Welcome. Before we look forward and discuss this potentially exciting prospect for our hardworking retirees, I feel it's important that we look backwards in terms of how we got where we are here today. And the mayor did speak on some of these items. And I just want to walk through some of the key events really dating back almost 10 years ago, which is hard to believe. So back in December of 2011, the former EM emergency manager, Lou Schimmel, issued an order with the approval of the Department of Treasury to basically eliminate all retiree healthcare benefits. In Mr. Schimmel's estimation, this was one of the moves he felt he had to make in order to balance the books of the city and to expedite his departure from the city and allow the city to, at some point, return to self-governance. As you can imagine, with a decision like that, it was not accepted and was met with litigation from Cypria, who, as the mayor mentioned, is a vast number of retirees that are represented by a board and legal counsel. They filed a lawsuit in June of 2012 in federal court, alleging multiple claims, including a violation of due process, violation of their contractual rights under their collective bargaining agreements. That litigation went on for some period of time. And ultimately, Mr. Schimmel departed the city control in August of 2013 and left in place an RTAB, which is a statute created entity, the Receivership Transition Advisory Board, that was in place to monitor the actions and progress of the city. And they also installed a city administrator, a gentleman by the name of Joseph Sabota, who was really there for the day-to-day operation. Mayor Waterman was formally elected in November of 13, but didn't take office until January 1st of 2014. And so for almost the next year and a half, the litigation went on. There were settlement discussions, but they were not very fruitful. Ultimately, the RTAB in the summer of 2015 approximately saw that Mayor Waterman was very capable and had full capacity to run the city and to at least assign her some significant duties. And so in that regard, the RTAB assigned to Mayor Waterman the full responsibility, oversight of this CIPRA litigation, as well as some other important matters. And so at that point, Mayor Waterman was able to convince the judge to allow us to engage a federal mediator who assisted us for approximately 2.5 years. In fact, we had two separate mediators, both very prominent local attorneys, each having their own skill set and specialties. And through all that hard work, through multiple meetings, discussions, ultimately we were able to reach a settlement in April of 2017. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. That was an important hurdle. Shortly thereafter, a number of retirees from the hospital system filed litigation, trying to stall or to sidetrack the litigation. That went on for another year and a half. And ultimately, the courts approved the settlement in November of 2018. And that we finally got a court order approving the settlement, approving the class action. Once that was accomplished, at that point, we were able to engage Attorney Kopex and her firm to assist us in the important process of having the IRS approve this matter. So in essence, the crux of the settlement is that the funding of the Irs pension system, which fortunately is way overfunded, which is a great thing, the excess funding of that Irs pension system was going to be transferred to a Viva, which is a special trust account. And that money, that extra dollars in the Viva would be used to fully fund retiree healthcare benefits. In addition, we were also able to convince the Police and Fire Viva, a separate trust account that funds the police and fire healthcare benefits, to join in with this newly created Viva to, in essence, create a super Viva that would provide healthcare benefits for all eligible retirees, both general employees and police and fire. This is the first of its kind in the nation, as far as I understand. Extremely complicated. Attorney Kopex and her expertise were able to guide the city through the complicated IRS process to lead us to where we are today. So with that, Mayor, I'm going to return the stage to you, and you can introduce our next panelist.
Yes, and we'll move on to our next panelist, and that's Attorney Kopex. You've heard her name mentioned, and as Attorney John Clark has described the beginning of the process, Attorney Kopex was engaged to handle the last part of the process and bring us up to current. She has a chronology of all those events, and as she does this, some of the questions that are asked me by retirees, and as I look back over the last number of years, I say, where did the time go? And she's going to explain to you the intensive processes going on, the intervening events that took this long, and will answer the question that so many of the retirees ask me, why did it take this long? So Attorney Kopacz, why did it take this long? And how did we finally come to where we are to realize this return of retiree healthcare?
Thank you, Mayor Waterman, and thank you, John, for giving us the chronology up to this point. So as discussed, the settlement was really a product of outside the box thinking to accomplish the city and its retirees' equitable goals. Coming up with the terms of the settlement agreement, as John explained, was a lengthy, comprehensive, and just novel idea. But to actually implement these terms was really a beast in and of itself. Again, to our knowledge, a municipality has never funded retiree healthcare through an overfunded pension plan before. And so in that regard, there's no how-to book on how to effectuate this settlement agreement. The city had one chance to get these applications right with the IRS, and we need to make sure that the applications were as compelling as possible. So to that end, for 2019 and early 2020, we spent time diligently preparing this documentation. We went through the current pension plan with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that it was meeting IRS requirements so that the retirees continued with their tax advantage status, and also to ensure that after this transition, the retirees maintained their benefits, pension benefits status quo. We had to have a lot of discussions with CIPRIA, and there was also discussions with the Irs board and the newly created Viva board. The Viva board came into existence also after we drafted and negotiated with CIPRIA the Viva trust agreement. So there was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of competing jurisdictions in the mix to make sure that, as I said, that this got done right. So we got the new Viva formed March of last year. We then got all of the IRS applications filed in May of 2020. We got response back on the tax exempt status of the newly created Viva fairly quickly in August of 2020. And that coincidentally is when we really started to have our discussions with the IRS regarding the pension transition. There was a lot of back and forth, some updated documents, and as this hadn't been done before, up until this point, we really did not know how the IRS was going to view the settlement. But in October of 2020, they came back and said, okay, go ahead and actually have council take action on the pension transition. And that's when we started to get optimistic, thinking, hey, they're not going to make us jump through these hoops of council action if they're not going to ultimately approve the transaction. So the transition of the pension benefit, or I'm sorry, the pension plan occurred as of April 1. The IRS approval was received on March 18 of this year. And we got the opt-out letter and notices to the retirees out within a couple of days of that. So it's really been a long time coming. We all understand that, but this IRS approval, which was necessary, is opening up what we're anticipating to be over $100 million of excess funding to restore city-funded retiree health care. This is an unprecedented solution, and I'd really, characterize this as a win for both the city and its retirees.
Thank you for that chronology. You've condensed very well the past history of the past 3 years into that 5-minute exposition. So thank you for making that clear to us laymen who haven't had to deal with the intricacies of all the IRS demands and all the voluminous paperwork and reports and research you had to do to get this application approved. At first, we weren't certain that the IRS would approve it because it was very novel and it was very new, as you point out, and nobody had any precedence to decide just how the IRS would rule on this. So we're happy that you so well prepared this application that the IRS moved it quickly through more quickly than we ever thought. We thought when you first advised us, it might take as long as 2 years, and you got it done in about 7 months. So we thank you for that. The retirees, thank you. All right, so leading up to our next speaker, who is Mr. Tony Saunders, and he's going to address the part that leads directly to the proposal. During the mediation, and he was with us throughout that mediation, as I said, he did the financial computations, because at the beginning we had no idea how we were going to solve this problem of both getting the retiree healthcare restored and keeping the city of Pontiac solvent. So we went through many different permutations and combinations of what could happen. In fact, there was one solution that we do a 425 transfer, very complicated IRS procedure. We spent a year looking at that only to realize that the numbers wouldn't work and the IRS regulations would not allow us to do that. So we came up with the other solution, and it was Tony who worked and drafted all these kind of role modeling that kind of brought us to the conclusion that we were able to do what we could do. As we did that, we realized that there would be enough of a surplus because the Irs Pension Board has done a wonderful job of protecting the fund, and it has grown at a 7% rate. So that allowed enough surplus that he actually came up with the thought that we could provide a higher monthly pension benefit permanently. And that would replace the fact that the $400 that so many retirees are getting now, that is a temporary benefit and that will cease when retiree healthcare is restored. So that $400 monthly increase in pension benefit that the retirees are getting now had to be restarted every year and renewed on the recommendation that I made, because I made a pledge that we would continue that until retiree healthcare got restored. So every year I would make the recommendation to council, who was required to do an actuarial report, and then council did the amendment that allowed that to be continued temporarily. But as we have heard that the retiree healthcare may be restored as early as September 1st of this year, that means that would no longer include that $400. And so that's why I'm bringing the proposal to council that we find a way to increase the pension benefit permanently. So that has to be done by an actuary study that council will have to do, and that's the proposal I plan to bring to them. But it is Tony Saunders who can tell you how we reach those computations and what he can do and what he has done to make sure that that would work and that modeling can be studied for the benefit of the retirees who couldn't use another $300 or $400 in their pension check every month. So with that, Tony, I think I've set the stage accurately, and you can give us more of the details.
Great. Thanks a lot for having me today. And I apologize if you hear noise. I have children who are being children right now. But just globally, just to kind of start off, I want to just make sure it's clear of some of the guideposts that we had in mind when this all begun. One, we wanted to make sure that whatever solution that we came up with, that we ensured the structural integrity and balance of the city long-term, to make sure that the city never went back towards receivership in the former days. Two, we wanted to make sure that there was continued sound funding as it relates to the general pension system. It's very important that we don't solve one problem while creating another. And then three, just globally, whether it was during negotiations or most recently with the mayor's proposal to increase or to permanently extend the enhanced pension benefits, we wanted to maximize value for all of the stakeholders. It's a little bit interesting that a deal such as this has so many different stakeholders. Sometimes the stakeholders have overlapping constituents, and sometimes they have completely different constituents. And we wanted to figure out how do we maximize the value for everyone. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the work that we did was risk mitigation. It was, we solved one problem, and how do we make sure that we kept the integrity of something else that may be impacted by a previous decision. So we were very careful in our work there. And then, globally, we weren't looking for perfection. We were looking for something that had a very strong level of reasonableness and equity. And with that being said, I think it's very rare that a transaction like this occurs where, all the stakeholders can essentially say that they're better off than they were yesterday. So I think the work that was done by all of the folks involved, the police and fire, Viva agreeing to the merger, the mayor, the council, there's a lot of stakeholders here. So I wanted to acknowledge that. The last thing I'll do is I'll introduce the actuary on our team, who's a very smart individual and spent a lot of time making sure that a preliminary analysis made sense. I don't think it would have made much sense for us to present a lavish plan to city council or others without making sure that there was a likelihood that a plan like this would be executed appropriately. So Kirill, he has a vast amount of experience focused on healthcare and pension actuarial work. He's a brilliant guy. He'll walk you through the proposal for the enhanced benefit. I think we did a really good job of making very conservative assumptions before we presented this to other stakeholders, and he'll walk you all through that right now.
Thanks, Tony, for that introduction, and thank you, Mayor Waterman. I also have to apologize for some background noise, so please bear with me. I'll try to talk loud. So I wanted to just start off with a little bit of background. Some of this has already been shared, but I'll just kind of reiterate some of these points. So the purpose of the actuarial analysis, which was done under the guidance of Mayor Waterman, was to determine whether a monthly benefit enhancement would be able to be provided to the eligible retirees based on the access assets that are being held in lieu of the current liability. So the city of Pontiac is, as of year-end 19, had a pension liability of $256 million. As of this same point in time, the city of Pontiac was holding $333 million in assets to cover that liability. The net between the assets and the liability is what we used to determine what supplemental benefit could be provided or enhanced benefit could be provided to these eligible retirees. Another point that'll make more sense in the subsequent slides is the fact that the city of Pontiac has seen an average historical investment rate of return of 7%, and that was the basis of our analysis. So as I mentioned, the proposal is to use these access assets, so this $77 million, to provide eligible retirees with a monthly benefit enhancement. And just to clarify, this is completely independent of any pension benefit owed, and also completely independent of the current temporary supplemental $400 that Mayor Waterman addressed. This would be paid in perpetuity unless there was a major change in the market that resulted in the city of Pontiac's historical 5-year average investment rate of return, or I will refer to this as trigger, to fall to or below 6%. So a little background on why we put this trigger in place. Given the uncertainty of the market and future investments, we wanted to make sure that the supplemental benefit was cost neutral to the city, in that it had no impact on funding the current pension liability and would not impact any negative balance in the future. So with that in mind, we calculated this enhanced benefit with the idea that, given that we know that the historical rate of return has been 7%, there's no reason or expectation for us to believe that in the future the city would see any smaller returns. But in case it did, the benefit would decrease proportionally to the historical 5-year average investment rate of return. So I just mentioned this, but again, to reiterate, the trigger has averaged greater than 7% historically, and the benefit would only be reduced if this trigger in the future fell to or below 6%. This is an example of the theoretical reduction to this enhanced benefit based on the rate of return trigger. So if the rate of return or the trigger stays at 7% or higher, the enhanced benefit that is suggested to be offered to eligible retirees is $400 a month in perpetuity. If when this trigger is recalculated, it falls to 6%, the suggestion would be to reduce the enhanced benefit to $360. Similarly, if the average 5-year average rate of return falls to 5%, the $400 monthly enhanced benefit would reduce to $192. And if at any point the trigger fell to 4% or lower, this enhanced benefit would be eliminated completely. And this is all in order to preserve the assets necessary to fund the current pension liability. Thus, this enhanced benefit would not impact that at all. Some key notes and some takeaways and some of the reasons that we calculated this enhanced benefit is one, that the enhanced benefit is something that the city of Pontiac and Mayor Waterman wanted to do because they were concerned about retirees' financial well-being. And given that the pension liability is overfunded, we wanted to use these excess assets to provide this additional $400 enhanced benefit. This enhanced benefit would continue in perpetuity unless there was a drastic change in the market, which would cause the trigger to fall to or below 6%. And this is an option that is presented based on all of the conversations that have been had and have been summarized here up until this presentation. And again, it's completely independent of any current pension liabilities. So this would be cost neutral to the city. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor Waterman.
All right, good presentation. And I think thank you for putting very complicated and complex financial calculations that you did over a period the last couple of years into something that is simplified that all of us laymen can understand. But I do want to emphasize, before we go to the question and answer, I do want to emphasize a couple of things that I know that retirees are concerned about, as well as I'm concerned about. And I'd just like to headline those once again, Tony and Krill. As I ask these questions, either one of you can answer it. Number one, the question I hear a lot of retirees is that this supplemental benefit, the principle of this is that it would in no way imperil the pension fund or the ability of the city to ensure that retirees would get their full pension through their entire lives or of their beneficiaries' entire lives. Is that one of the principles upon which your modeling was founded? Kirill and Tony.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So that is important for us to know, because as retirees and as mayor, because we wouldn't want to have one benefit that would jeopardize that's the basic structure of the pension fund. So that is a principle that I want to make sure everybody knows was important. Now, this benefit could be given to all of the retirees based upon council's approval of an amendment to the ordinance. But council would be responsible for doing their actuarial studies to determine as required by law. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right, okay. So I just want to make sure that people know there are extra safeguards built in, that this is a proposal that we're bringing, but by law, the council who would have to approve this would have to do actuarial studies that would meet the safeguards. So the amount that we are proposing is just a theoretical, that those are just the ones that we did the role modeling on, but we did it just for the GERS system, and it would need, council would have to have the responsibility of doing it for both the police and fire and the GERS system. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And the amount that we're suggesting is just a theoretical amount. It could be any amount that council, by their actuarial studies, proved to be safe and efficient. Okay. So I just want to make those headlines, and I just want to make sure that as we hear you speak, that I'm interpreting what you're saying for the sake of the retirees, because I know the questions have been coming into us over the weeks since the retirees got this proposal and this letter. I just want to make sure that that is understood. All right, any comments in addition to what I've just said, Kirill or Tony? And if not, we'll move on to the question and answer. So we're going to have a question and answer session. Tony Chubb and Darren Carrington is here with us. If you have looked at the questions in the chat box, as well as Darren, I know you've had questions that have come into your department over the last couple of weeks since the letter went out. If you could also make sure you cover some of those questions as well. And this is just about the increased pension monthly allotment proposal. And then after we do those questions, then we'll go into the other questions regarding the opt-out and whatever other questions have been coming in. So Tony, you want to start
Sure.
with that, and then Darren, you can help out too and pitch in.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor. Looks like you assembled an excellent team to explain the benefits, because we actually, from about 115 people participating right now, we only have one question that I think you already touched on. And that is, did or will the police and fire see the pension increase also?
Who'd like to answer that one?
I can answer that one.
All right.
So in order for any pension to be enhanced under Michigan law, the retirement systems actuary needs to run the analysis. So, we've done the legwork in figuring out what we thought may or may not be plausible based on, our actuary's calculation for the GERS. But, in order for this to actually get approved, first the GERS actuary will also need to run the analysis, and the police and fire actuary would need to run the analysis as well. So it's possible that it could be approved for both. It's possible it could be, approved for neither. It's possible it could be one or the other. And that's really up to council to decide whether or not the city wants to have the retirement board's actuaries run these tests.
All right, thank you for that. So were there any other questions related to the increased pension?
So with regard to the enhanced pension benefit, the only other question, which I believe you also touched on, is when will this go to the council for their review and approval?
Well, that's a question I guess is addressed to me, because administration, it's our recommendation through my proposal, and we had discussed this. This is the second of the webinars we had. We had one March 31st, I believe. And at that time, I had proposed taking this to council on April 20th. For those of you who've been following council meetings over the last 2 weeks, you understand that council has not had a quorum in the last 2 weeks to actually carry on the business. So the plan and calendar that I have maybe have to be changed somewhat because we're not going to be able to have to play catch up a little bit on the business items that will be carried over from the 2 past weeks that council has not been able to have a quorum. The council by our city charter is supposed to have a meeting every week, but there was some difficulty in their getting a quorum. I won't go into the details of that. So hopefully we will have that quorum next week, but we'll be able to catch up on some of the items that I had pushed over from the prior 2 weeks. And so I may have to push back this particular item that I wanted to get on for April 20th, but it may have to go forward depending on how much of the backlog we'll be able to do in the coming meeting. So I know that's a long answer, but I did want to give people an adequate response as I could. My intent is to get this on as quickly as possible, because as you hear, there are some other studies that would have to be done by council. They may want to have some other deliberation. But first, I wanted to let the retirees know of this possibility. I've been sitting on this for a year or so because we had to wait for the Irs approval before we could enter into this part of the proposal. Because if the other part wasn't approved, then this part would not have worked. So we're happy for that. So at this point, we've covered that part of the increased pension amount proposal.
And Mayor, there was one more question on the
Okay.
enhance,
Right.
and it was asking about the rate of return. And I think probably Tony or Carrillo can answer this. And it was in connection with the trigger. And it said, are we looking at actual rate of return or assumed rate of return?
The trigger would be based on the historical actual rates. So you would be looking backward, and if the 5-year average, and the reason you do the 5-year average is because generally speaking, rates of return can be volatile from year to year, and that's not a good enough indicator that there's any real issue. So you would be looking at the historical 5-year actual rate of return. And if that 5-year average dropped to or below 6%, that's when this proposed enhanced benefit would start being reduced.
All right, so we are at that point. There may be other questions, keep them coming in the chat. But I would like to, before moving on to the other more general questions, I would just like to summarize in the statement where we are right now in terms of the considerations. And I will do that by reading the media alert that we released on March 22nd, soon after we had received the announcement from the IRS that they had approved our settlement agreement. Very much a glorious day that we had been waiting for. And this was something that was sent out and included in the retiree packages. So some of you may have seen already. It was titled, "The City of Pontiac Announces IRS Approval of the Terms of Retiree Healthcare Settlement Agreement and Return of Retiree Healthcare." The City of Pontiac is pleased to announce that the Internal Revenue Service has approved the cornerstone of the groundbreaking settlement agreement entered into between the city with a class of retirees related to city funding of retiree healthcare benefits. And that agreement was reached in the United States District Court of the Eastern District of Michigan, case number 2:2-CV-12830-AC-PIK. This was given final approval by the court on November 19, 2018. With this IRS approval, which came in, as you heard, March 8th of this year, the city will be able to utilize what is anticipated to be over $100 million of excess funding from its pension system to restore city-funded retiree health, dental, and vision benefits for eligible retirees. Pension benefits will also continue without reduction, or may be increased if this proposal is approved by City Council. The settlement agreement resulted from a lawsuit filed by the City of Pontiac Retired Employees Association in 2012 after the former emergency manager eliminated retiree healthcare benefits as a cost-saving measure during the city's financial crisis. A financial crisis which I'm glad to say we're now out of. We have achieved not only financial stability, but financial surplus. Unlike typical litigation settlements, the terms of this settlement agreement are highly complicated and technical, and to the city's knowledge is the only one of its kind. The terms of the settlement agreement, conditioned upon IRS approval, which we have now achieved, generally requires the city to reestablish its pension system. The reestablished pension system will be governed by a process and format as is provided under the current pension system, and will retain assets to cover the liabilities of the current pension system, plus a substantial cushion of assets. And I must add, since this media alert went out, the termination of the old Irs pension system was termed out on March 31st of this year, and the new Irs pension system board has been sworn in, and they have now started the operations of the new reformed Irs pension. Certain excess assets from the current pension system will then be transferred to a newly created tax-exempt Viva trust, which will administer the city-funded retiree health. And there will be benefits for eligible retirees and their spouses and beneficiaries as covered by the settlement agreement. The IRS has approved this plan, as you've heard, and now the next stage of the transition is occurring. So that is going on. There's many steps to that. We're working between the 3 respective boards concerned with getting the terms of the settlement agreement finalized. And to that end, as they are costing out the cost of health insurance to the retirees, we had to give out notice, and that's why the retirees received letters saying that with the settlement agreement, that eligible retirees could either receive the health care and have that returned, or they could opt out if they didn't need health care coverage and get $20,000 cash. So there are questions about that process, and people have been calling in to see how they should decide to take the election or to continue to receive health care coverage through the pension system. And with that, we're going to open up the floor now to questions about that provision and those questions, because I know there have been many questions about that as you wish to decide how you want to elect that, and also just questions about the timing of the return of healthcare and whatever else that you need to do to prepare for that. And with that, Tony Chubb and Darren Carrington, can we go on to that next set of questions?
Sure, Mayor. We have one here. Is it possible for an employee to take the insurance, but the wife takes the opt-out?
Now that's assuming that both are retirees or receiving a retiree benefit, right?
I don't believe it is. I think that's the important part of the message.
Okay. All right, so who is prepared to answer that question on our panel?
Sam, do you want to
I just
handle
want to
that?
make sure I understand the question. The question is, you have a employee who retires, who is married, and the employee, oh, I'm sorry, the retiree wants to take the health insurance?
But the spouse does not.
Okay. Yeah, under that circumstance, no, only the retiree would be eligible to make the declaration of either insurance or to take the one-time stipend.
All right, and the next question is the one-time payment taxable?
Okay, so
So-
the one time, go ahead. Can you? You
Yeah,
understand
I was
the
going to
question?
say,
Okay.
so on that point, first and foremost, I'll say this at the beginning and at the end. It's very important that each individual retiree or beneficiary, consult their own tax advisor or tax preparer or whatnot. But in terms of this opt-out payment, it is not being, and it's not structured and not being presented as a tax-free benefit. So this, it's a payment. We expect to be issuing a 1099 form, and the tax liability is going to be specific to each individual situation. But from a global perspective, this is not a tax-free benefit in the way in which the payment is being structured.
All right, and the next question is, where can I find the retiree healthcare summary of benefits to compare to my current plan?
That summary of benefits is in the settlement agreement. It does state the kind of policy that was agreed upon as part of the settlement agreement. John, you may want to expound upon this too. But also, we did include the provisions for the healthcare coverage in the mailings that we send out to retirees who are eligible for healthcare. Now, remember, there's different groups of eligibility within our pension system. So one of the things that is knowledgeable about the hospital retirees is that they were not eligible according to what was bargained by their CBAs for healthcare coverage. So when healthcare is restored to the rest of the retirees, that $400 supplemental pension benefit that they have been receiving temporarily will cease unless council does accept the proposal and does the studies to continue a permanent supplement and increased monthly pension payments, that the hospital retirees could be eligible for that. So that is why we're offering the proposal we talked about at the beginning of this webinar. Does anybody else want to add to the statement I just made?
Yeah, I did want to add on there, Mayor, the plan as called for in the settlement agreement, and as you know, with the new Viva, as we move forward with securing the actual benefits, the plan is expected to be a Blue Cross Blue Shield, simply Blue 500. So that's the plan that's called for in the agreement, or something comparable. So as the mayor indicated, we did give some of the key provisions of that Blue Cross Blue Shield simply 500, and kind of outlines what that coverage will look like. I did look on the website. There are some information that's available on the Blue Cross Blue Shield, but for comparison purposes, or to get more information, the actual plan that's being contemplated and we expect to have in place is the Blue Cross Blue Shield, simply Blue 500.
And that provision can be found on page 5 of the settlement agreement. Paragraph 9 of the settlement agreement, page 5, lays out all the specifics of the health insurance coverage. And as the finance director indicated, including the Simply Blue 500 plan.
Okay. Next question.
Or the next question is, does participation in the opt-out impact my pension benefit?
I can answer that question, or Sam, if you want to. The answer is no.
Okay.
I think just to kind of add on, the pension and this retiree health benefits are essentially separate. And so that the opt-out is essentially a pension or a retiree giving up their rights for the benefits that will be available from the Viva. So when it's all said and done, you'll be a member of the Viva as well as the member in your current pension plan. And so those earned pension service credits and pension payments are not impacted in regards to the healthcare benefit that will be provided in the new Viva.
Mayor, I also want to stress that, and again, I believe that we have stated this in the documentation that's been provided. The decision to opt out is irrevocable, okay? Unlike if you have insurance through your work or your spouse has insurance and you decide, hey, next year I'm going to take my wife's insurance coverage, but in the next year, the next enrollment, I can re-enroll. That's typical. That happens all the time. Or if you change jobs, you can change insurance. This decision is irrevocable. Once you make the decision and you receive the funds, that is a lifetime decision. So it's just very important for retirees to understand that it's not something where in 5 years you say, you know what, I really wish I had that insurance and I want to re-enroll and get back in. That decision once made, and that's why the dollar amount is significant. But I just want to just reaffirm that and make sure that's clear for all of the viewers and all the attendees.
All right, here's a question. When will the $400 benefit that we currently receive end?
That is renewed annually, and that is done when I recommend to the City Council that it be extended, and each year it requires an amendment to the ordinance. The amendment to the ordinance does say the $400 will be continued for a year. This year will end August 31st, 2021, or until retiree health care is restored, whichever comes first. So it looks like this year, if the boards move ahead with the calendar that they said they would do, that once they bid out the insurance and get the proper agencies in place to deliver insurance, they have calculated that September 1st would be the start date for the insurance. So by that, we will not ask council to renew that temporary benefit. So that will cease at that time while as healthcare is restored. Now, if there is any hiccups in the Irs board or the police and fire board or the Viva board in terms of getting those plans in place, then that may change. But right now, it is due to end that 1 year, August 31st. So, but if the council accepts the recommendation to increase the supplemental monthly benefits, and if they get the studies that are required by law and come up with a way to increase that monthly benefit permanently, if that's done in time, then that could also start whenever council has reached those requirements and get that as approved by the IRS. So those are things that we're trying to time, and we're trying to have all the boards are trying to move expeditiously so that these things are dependent on a lot of different variables. So hopefully they can move along with the calendar that was set and was agreed by all the parties. But if there's any hiccups, then that could change the dates. But we're watching that carefully as we move along.
All right, Mayor, and another important question. What is the due date to file the opt-out election form?
In the letter, that is, and Darren Carrington do validate for us, we had given them 30 days. That was April 22nd. So as we are looking to see the numbers of the letters that we've received and the questions, that is the date so far. What percentage of people have responded so far, Darren, that we know?
Well, as of yesterday, as of the 13th, mail that had been received, we had gotten about I think 98 opt-out letters. So keeping in mind, if people don't choose to exercise it, we don't get anything back. But as of yesterday, we had gotten in 98 responses of people that sent in the letters and indicating their intention to opt out.
Exactly. So our April 22nd is the date, but we're using the postmark date. So if you can get it in, we can get it properly notarized by April 22nd, then it will be counted. We know for using the mail in some areas has been kind of unpredictable. So we have factored that in, but we do have to set a definite date because until we know who is opting out, there's no way we can establish a census. And the census is needed in order for the Viva board to go ahead and to cost out and to bid out the price of the insurance so that we can get an insurer on board to begin to supply the benefits. So that's why April 22nd is the cutoff date that was established. Next question.
All right, Mayor, and we do have a lot of repetitive questions. There's some that are very much unique to individual circumstances. Just going through here. There is a question regarding who has to sign off on the retiree health care opt-out election form.
So I do know the form, and I certainly would like for the attorneys to weigh in here. The form does have a space for the retiree as well as a spouse. And those signatures are required to be notarized. And if John and Samantha could speak to, the specific requirements, kind of around those signatures and what's required of that.
And also speak to the fact, as well as while we have attorneys talking about that, I've had some calls come in about if there is a power of attorney. Okay. What are the requirements required power of attorney?
So I can answer that. So both as Darren said, both the spouse and the retiree need to sign off on the opt-out. And that's pursuant to, because the spouse is essentially not getting his or her retiree health care as well. So both signatures are required and both are required to be notarized. So make sure that when you take your form to a notary to have that signed, that it's notarized under both the spouse and the retiree's signature. With respect to power of attorney, the city will acknowledge the power of attorney, but you're going to have to send in a copy of that with your opt-out form. And that's to ensure that the power of attorney actually covers what this is for. Sometimes there's a financial power of attorney, sometimes there's a healthcare power of attorney. And in this case, we just want to make sure that whatever power of attorney is in place actually gives that person the authority to sign in this context.
Hi, Mayor, and it looks like we've covered about everything. The last question is, are the settlement agreement and the benefit summary plan included on the city or available on the city website?
The settlement agreement is available to all of the retirees and can be mailed to them. Because it is specific to a certain class of people, we prefer to mail that out individually to the retirees who request it. And for those who are CIPRIA members, it's also available through CIPRIA. It's also available through either of the boards that all the retirees have access to, either the Irs Pension Board, the Police and Fire Board, or through the City of Pontiac Retirement System. So that is available to you, the settlement agreement. And was there another document they asked about, Tony?
The benefit summary of the medical benefits of the Viva.
Yes, for retirees who are eligible to receive healthcare benefits. That was mailed out in your packet, in your letter. If you need another copy, if you want to request other information about that, there's a number you can call. Darren, I'm going to have you give the number of the retirement office that you want to receive those calls and requests, or give them an email, which was also in the letter that we sent out, that it can be sent to.
Sure. So for phone calls, that's going to be area code 248-758-3293. Again, that's 248-758-3293. And that's, the City of Pontiac, our HR and retirement division at City Hall. And I'll have to pull the email. I want to make sure I get that correctly.
All right, Mayor, and we have gotten a lot of questions. I'm sorry to anyone that I may have missed, but I think we've covered the gist of each of the questions.
I think there's a number of questions that I saw just came in recently, Tony, I think that are separate. I want to make sure that we cover as much as we can because, the date is the 22nd. So I just saw a question come in about who do you file a return of address with? So I did see that come in and I think there was some that just came in. So if you want to go back through and cover some of the things that weren't covered. The return of address, if you're an active retiree right now, you are have the same communication that you've had all along. If you want to change your address, you can do it through the retirement office. You do have that contact information, or you can also contact either of the Irs Pension Office or the Police and Fire Pension Office. Either way, we communicate and you can change that address or other information.
And Mayor, on that email, that's going to be humanresources@pontiac.mi.us. That's human resources, one word, HUMANRESOURCES @pontiac.mi.us. And I'll also put that in the chat as well.
All right, and here's a new question. How does the settlement agreement affect future retirees that have not yet retired?
John Clark.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Yes. So only those individuals who are eligible for a city-sponsored pension are eligible to participate in the terms of the settlement agreement. So any current city employee, they are not eligible for a defined benefit pension. Those were done away with years ago. And so that pension system, except for some exceptions, and I'm not going to get into the very narrow exceptions, most, if not all, city employees are not eligible to participate in the pension system, and therefore they're not eligible for the healthcare benefits set forth in the settlement agreement.
And I'll just elaborate on that. So the settlement agreement specifically sets forth what the class was. And I believe it indicates that you had to have been eligible for retiree health care when the emergency manager stripped the availability back in 2011. Now, if were a deferred retiree, so you were already eligible, but you hadn't exercised that right, you will have your opt-out right when you do become eligible for your pension. So if you are in that deferred class, the opt-out option will come out right when you become eligible for the pension.
And also for John and Samantha, I know we've gotten questions at the retirement office and finance department in terms of specifying who the eligible parties are to receive the opt-out payment. Making a distinction between the retiree and any whether it's a surviving spouse or some other type of beneficiary. Can you just speak to that in regards to the settlement and specifically who is entitled to the opt-out payment?
Yeah, the settlement agreement is very clear on that the opt-out payment and the right to it is only vested in the retiree or the deferred retiree. So if the retiree is deceased, the spouse is not eligible to opt out, or a beneficiary would not be able to opt out. There may be some rights to the actual medical benefits depending on, how the class was defined, but the opt-out right itself is only for the retiree.
In line with the previous question, and Samantha, you might expound upon what you said previously. People asked, when would the retiree healthcare actually start? And you have been part of that process, working with all three boards to make sure they coordinated all the things that need to be finalized in order to get to the point where we can actually start issuing retiree healthcare. So would you just kind of summarize all those steps that have to be gone through to complete that process? Not a lot of details, a lot of portfolio management transition, but if you can just summarize in synopsis to give people an idea of what remains to be done, including all the consultants and the contractors that the Viva has to employ and to get to working to manage the newly established Viva.
Yeah, so all the boards are working really, really hard and incredible hours to get this up and running. The new Viva board is in the process of bidding out the insurance. They already have their investment manager lined up, and the TPA and the other administrators are in the works or already working hard with this. So the biggest obstacles there will be getting the insurance set up. And again, we need the census. We need to know who's going to be participating versus who's opting out in order to get accurate bids. And then once we have the bids done, then there would be an enrollment process, which the Viva board and their administrator is going to be working on. At the retirement plan level, we have the auditors conducting, reviewing the financial statements from the pension plan as of the March 31 termination date. And once that audit is done, the actuary is going to conduct the analysis to figure out exactly what the excess assets were that should be transferred to new Viva. And so once that's conducted, we'll have a better feel of how much money is going to the retiree health fund. Again, the target date is September 1, but there is a ton of moving pieces here, and that's the goal. Everybody's working as hard as they can to get this up and running as quickly as possible.
All right, here's another question. Will current dependents be eligible for the new insurance?
I'm not sure what current dependence means. So, I mean, I think, John, you can speak to this a bit, but I think part of it is dependent on how eligibility was defined initially in the CBAs.
Yeah, I'd have to review that, but yeah, it is determined through the collective bargaining agreements. Each one of the contracts, depending on the bargaining group, had different qualifications in terms of age requirements, when the dependent was born relative to date of retirement, is this a new dependent based on a new spouse? Somewhat of a complicated situation, and in each of those circumstances will be reviewed once we have the carrier in place, once we have the insurance broker in place. When people make application for insurance benefits, at that point, it will be reviewed relative to the collective bargaining agreement, and at that point, a determination will be made. There's not a blanket or a simple response to that. It really is a case-by-case determination.
All right, one of the things we found out as we've gotten all the questions, and we try to emphasize with people, is for some of these questions, there's no generic answer that applies to everybody. So that's why we have to, as we're answering these questions, we have to look at your particular situation, because situations are different, okay? And so in order to give the right answer, we must look at the specific things that apply in your case. In some cases, there's a previous spouse. In some cases, there is a court order which determines the way the pension benefits are handled out, or the eligibility. So we want to make sure that we give the correct information. And so that's why we want people to call in specifically, as opposed to us just giving generalities that may not apply to everybody on a call like this. So that's why we have to be very careful and very precise. Next question.
Sure, Mayor. And I think that was a good point. I think we're one general question that looks like it's remaining is how is the Viva board selected?
That's pursuant to the confines of the settlement agreement. So there's 2 members that are appointed by the mayor. There's 1 member that's appointed by city council. There's 1 member that's appointed from the membership of the Irs. There's 1 member that's appointed from the membership of police and fire. And there's 1 member who's appointed from the new Viva membership as a whole. And then the 6 members vote on a 7th trustee. But all that's specifically laid out in the settlement agreement as well.
Darren, have we covered a lot of the questions that have been coming over the phone, or do you have from your list some things that were not covered here thus far that you would like to also share?
I think we have covered many of the questions. We covered the due date and the postmark. Again, we recommend that those be sent in certified mail so that they can be tracked on the retiree or beneficiaries end. We certainly have gotten questions in terms of the timing of the payment in the insurance, and I think we spoke to that earlier. We talked about the Blue Cross Blue Shield plan, that's Simply Blue 500. A number of questions about the impact on the pension, and we did cover that. The taxability issue we spoke to. I would say, I think we have covered, pretty much covered the questions that we've been seeing pretty regularly through City Hall.
There's another question I just saw come through. When will the payout for those who will opt the $20,000 option, when will that be paid out? So, excuse me, I'm going to pass to someone else to
Yep.
Answer that.
So I think Samantha kind of spoke to some of the dynamics that are going on. While we're at the kind of the tail end of a pretty long process, there's still a number of steps that we have to go through. This is kind of step one of what I would consider to be the final phase, or some of the final phases. And I think the mayor spoke to, we're really clarifying of all the eligible participants who's going to be in the class of people that will get the new benefits and go into the new Viva, and who are going to relinquish their rights and take the opt-out payment. And that's the process that we're going through right now. We still are having to address some issues. Some are more technical than others. I know we're trying to look at exactly where the payments can come from. There's some limitations on the payments being able to be taken out of the new Viva. We actually have to see how many people exercise the option. And then we'll, be able to address exactly, how and when those payments are to be structured. But I think certainly, we're looking at, a few months before we can go through that process. I know, speaking as a member of the administration, as a member of the new Viva, we certainly are trying to adhere to that August 31st, September timeline. And in order for us to do those benefits, we certainly would have to have the opt-out payments by that date. And so we're, again, working on a number of different fronts to try and address all the relevant issues.
All right, and I see one last question here. I'm the spouse of a deceased City of Pontiac retiree. Am I eligible for the one-time payment?
Okay, so once again, that's one. And Samantha, I see that you're trying to wrap your head around that. There's some things that, some details of that. There's spouse of a retired spouse. So is this spouse the beneficiary of the retiree? That we'd have to know that. Is this spouse, is the retiree still living? Or in one case, I found out the retiree had been deceased. So do we know from this question, the way that's posed, those specific circumstances in this case?
Tony, was the question related to the opt-out payment?
That's correct.
Yeah, so the spouse is not going to be eligible for the opt-out payment. That's just with the retiree or the deferred retiree.
Okay. All right. If they were still married, then just one of them would get the retiree. That's correct.
Yeah, I think the key point was that the spouse, the retiree, I believe, has passed away. That was part of the question, Tony.
Yeah.
That the retiree had passed away, and we're dealing with a surviving spouse, as Samantha had pointed out and had spoken to earlier. The benefit itself is only for retirees and deferred retirees. And so in those cases where we have a surviving spouse or some other beneficiary, they may very well be entitled to the benefits that are going to be offered through the new Viva. But as it relates to the opt-out payment, that's only for the retiree, and that person would need to be living. If I stated that correctly, Samantha.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, if the retiree has not passed away, of course, the retiree is eligible to select the opt-out. Yes.
Correct.
All right.
Mayor, and
They're good questions. They're good questions, and everybody has particular circumstances. So that's why we have to be very detailed in going about that, so you get the right answer, because people are using these to judge, to make this decision.
All right, Mayor, and it looks like we've covered all of the questions I saw. If I haven't missed any, like I said, I apologize. There are quite a few that came through here.
All right. So with that, we'll go around and see if there's any, we'll go around and see if there are any other last comments from either of our speakers. I'll start in reverse order. Darren Carrington, Finance Director, any final statements you would like to make about the process and expectations?
No, just want to, thank everyone on the panel here. I know, everyone's been putting in a lot of effort for a very long time. I've only recently joined this team, but I do understand the effort that has gone in, and more importantly, to the retirees and to the families and spouses and everyone out there. I've had an opportunity to speak with a number of people, and I just appreciate the patience that everyone has shown. We certainly want to encourage anyone, if there are any questions that you have, reach out to us. That email address, again, is humanresources@pontiac.mi.us, or call. And we're trying to process these phone calls and emails as quickly as possible. So we certainly will. We're committed to getting to that. Not a day goes by that the mayor's not pounding me to make sure I get back to everyone. So we're here, and we certainly are understanding our responsibility to be of service and to respond in a timely fashion.
Okay. Tony Chubb, any other last comment or anything
Mayor,
that you would like to?
just that you had briefly touched on, the next step to make the enhanced benefit a reality requires action by council. And so, you've directed us to supply the necessary resolutions and ordinance amendments to obtain those actuarial studies that the council needs to take action on, and to amend the ordinances to allow for the enhanced benefit. So we'll do that, and we just need cooperation of council.
All right. Next is Kirill Jin, our financial wizard here, that you made all the numbers work for us and gave us that assurity that we had to check and double check. And so I thank you for your patience and your perseverance as we went through this process to be able to bring this solution forward. Would you like to make any last comments based upon any of the statements or you heard, or questions that were asked?
No, I'll just reiterate, thank you, Mayor, for bringing this up and giving us the opportunity to conduct the actuarial analysis. And thank you to the panelists and everyone that is, in listening in. So.
Very good. Tony Saunders, you stood with us throughout the mediation and gave us the constructs that gave us the vision to make these proposals. You were the one who said, the city of Pontiac owns this pension fund. And when the last retiree was going to be paid out because of the overfunding, there was going to be a huge windfall that would fall to whatever government, 60 or 70 or 80 years ago from now would be in place when the last retiree and beneficiary died. So you put into my head the thought that, well, why shouldn't we put that in the pockets and to the service of retirees now, and their spouses and beneficiaries now? So, we didn't know whether that would work or not, but a couple of years later, with a lot of financial constructs, we realized, and that has resulted in the proposal that we're going to bring to council. So I'd like to recognize that thought and have you make any last comments you care to make.
Yeah, just briefly, it's funny. My attention is I'm making sure my kids are okay while they're playing outside. And when we first started this, one of them wasn't born and the other, was barely born. And I remember the anxiety my father had. He was a Detroit police officer who got his retiree healthcare taken away. I remember that moment, and it's kind of a little bit emotional when you think about everything the retirees had to go through. So, I don't take that lightly. And I'm appreciative for the opportunity to be able to even kind of work with you all. But two, I just want to thank the retirees and their spouses and dependents for their sacrifice, because, seeing my father go through that wasn't, a pretty thing when he, gave his life to a city and he feels like they turned their back on him. So I appreciate all the work you've done to make this happen. This was not easy, and most good things in life aren't. So I just want to say thank you to the retirees and thank you, Mayor, for all the work you've done here.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for your comments. We appreciate your service and this effort. The next, Samantha Kopas, you came here thinking you just had to file an application with the IRS, and you got enrolled in a lot of more detail than that. We needed you. So would you like to make any final comment?
Well, I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I agreed to sign up for this, but this has been an incredible experience, and everything we've discussed today, it's really positive for Pontiac and all of the retirees. And one thing I just would like everybody to keep in mind is, the settlement agreement doesn't take into account every single, unique situation. So a lot of the questions that may be coming up, you're asking, why don't you have an answer? Well, it was a global agreement based on a population of 1,000 people, and every single situation could not be evaluated at the time after years and years of mediation, which I wasn't even involved in. But when you come to an agreement, you can't take into account every single possibility. But I can assure you, having been talking on behalf of the city with the Viva board and the retirement boards and the police and fire Viva board, everybody is working really, really hard to get all of these details ironed out, so that the correct answer has come to, and that everybody who is entitled to, retiree healthcare is getting that in the way contemplated. So we really appreciate your patience, and we're going to get this resolved and up and running very soon.
Yes. And also I want to mention a colleague of yours. You came on after the settlement agreement, but as part of the mediation team was your colleague, Richard Warren. And I do thank him for that. He was a very instrumental part of the mediation. And that was his specialty as we went through that bartering and the various constructs that we went through during that period. So I do want to send my regards to him. And I have communicated to him periodically. I know he's proud of the fact he played a part in such a historic and monumental decision for the city of Pontiac.
Yeah, I know that he considers this to be a truly rewarding experience, and I will give him your regards.
All right. And John Clark, you were here from the very beginning, from the first thrust of this litigation. And so you preceded me and had to cue me in and get me on board as I became mayor and took this on. So give us your final salvo on this.
Yeah, Mayor, and again, thank you so much for this opportunity. Yes, I can recall back when the orders were signed, when this decision was made on the healthcare. Thank goodness for your leadership and for your guidance through this process. It was really critical to get us where we are today, and I commend you for that. And to pair it with Tony Saunders indicated, I also want to personally thank the retirees for their patience, for their fortitude. Things were at times contentious, but always professional. I think we all had the ultimate goal in mind of getting where we are today. And so I do want to commend the retirees and the leadership of the retirees in getting us where we are today. We still have some important hurdles to cover here, both in terms of the healthcare benefits and potentially the pension enhancement. So we are going to have to still continue to work together to have the cooperation of the administration, of the retirees, and the city council. Importantly, as Attorney Chubb indicated, we need council's continued involvement and assistance here so that we can cross the finish line in the next coming months and put this important chapter behind us so that the city can move on and accomplish other great things. So again, Mayor, thank you very much.
I thank all of our panelists who have been here for the term of duty they have served to reach this, and they continue to do until the checks are written that will restore retiree health care, for all you have done. I thank the City Council for continuing to work with us and to, as we brought them the various resolutions, to approve those and to keep that moving. I thank the various boards, the Irs Board, the Police and Fire Viva Board, and the newly established Viva Board that are going to be important for making sure that this gets realized for our retirees and that it's sustained for all our retirees' lifetimes. And most importantly, I thank the retirees for being patient. I know many of you had different circumstances. You realize that this was a difficult situation from the city, but it's come out to be a win-win for all of us here. I see those of you who've had comments. I thank you. I'm gratified that we are able to achieve a solution which restores the healthcare benefits and the faith and goodwill of the city for what they promised you, and I thank you for your years of service for Pontiac as the infrastructure got us where we are. Many of you have sent me comments through the years. I see you, Rob Lavoie. Many of you, I have known you when you were worked for the city, and I haven't seen you since. And some of you here on this call or on other calls we've had. It's nice to know you're doing well. It's nice to hear from you. And thank you for your words of compliments. I do want to serve you, and I do want to make you proud. And I do want to do what is necessary to fulfill the commitment that the city made to you when you delivered your services during your years of work in the city of Pontiac. And with that, we continue to be available to you. I know there's a lot of questions to come in. We will look to continue the process that has been described, and I'm very happy and privileged and honored to speak on behalf of the citizens of Pontiac. And this is your Mayor, Deirdre Waterman, signing off. Take care now.